Now, yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer set out his plans to tackle national security. Today, he's looking at energy security. Can you spot a theme here?
Security?
Something about security, I think. But Labour will close the door on Putin, so says Keir Starmer, by reducing Britain's reliance on fossil fuels from overseas.
But the Confederation of British Industry, that's the body that represents almost 200,000 businesses, is urging Sir Keir Starmer to reconsider plans to increase the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas firms.
Well, joining us now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Liam, which is it? Are we going to get more secure with the Labour plans for more green energy or less with their taxes on fossil fuels?
Well, I must say, Tom and Emily, I've been waiting for quite a long time for a bit of detail on Labour's energy plan, and very little is forthcoming except, as you say, more rhetoric about the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas projects. Let's have a little look at some of what Keir Starmer has said today and the implications. Keir Starmer said that Labour's new energy entity, GBNews it's called, will close the door on Vladimir Putin. That's what he says. We now know that GBNews is going to be a publicly owned investment company. Like, we don't know where the money for the investment is going to come from, rather than a utility company. Previous speculation was that it would replace the private sector utility companies. That's now no longer the case. Just shows you how vague these plans are. We barely know what this entity, GBNews, is. It's worth saying, as I've said to you before on GBNews, that half of all active oil and gas fields in the North Sea are due to close by 2030, believe it or not. And hang on to your hat, strap yourself in, because the North Sea still provides 83% of the UK's oil and 54% of the natural gas that we use. And oil and gas still account for overall about 3/4 of all the energy we use when you include transport. So look, energy policy, it used to be the preserve of policy wonks, economists and nerds like me. After the war in Ukraine, massive spike in energy prices, not just for households, but companies as well, which is why even the usually very herbivorous Confederation of British Industry, always keen to get close to incoming governments, is complaining, because UK firms in particular, households have had some help with their energy bills. UK firms are paying more for their energy, their electricity, not least our manufacturers, than any other major economy in Europe. That's led to inflation. That's pushed up the cost of living crisis. That has hindered our productivity and our growth and all the rest of it. And I'm afraid to say, with the best will in the world, I still can't see anything in Labour's statements on energy which gives me any detail on what they're actually going to do about this.
Yeah, I mean, Liam, John's got in touch and he's saying, I still want to know exactly what this GBNews is. Is it a generating company to rival the likes of British Gas? Is it a facilities company? What's the cost of setting it up? How many people is it going to employ? Is it just another Quango? It seems to me that it seems, from what I've read about it, that it's more of an investment vehicle.
We know that now. We didn't really know it before. And that's how sketchy the details are. And something else is happening here, Emily. Look, there is a long-term move away from fossil fuels. The UK used to use coal-fired power stations to generate 40% of our electricity. As recently as the turn of this century, it's now just 1 or 2% every year, which is coal. Renewables do account for roughly 1/3 to 2/5 of the electricity that we generate. But, when we really look at this, is it true to say that renewables are, quotes, cheap? And at the moment, they're not cheap because of the big subsidies that are put on households and firms' electricity bills to pay for subsidies for wind farms, such as you're seeing now, offshore wind farms, to pay for subsidies for solar power and so on. And, of course, the fact that renewables are intermittent means, as we've often discussed here on GB News, that we have to fall back often on a day-to-day basis on gas-fired power stations, which are very, very expensive to fire up. So it's almost as if our high share of renewables in the UK, and as I say, about 2/5 of our electricity is renewables on some days, is actually harming households because it's leading at the moment to more expensive energy bills. And that reality is just now starting to seep through into the political mainstream, if you like. It's something that people like me have been saying for months and even years. And it strikes me, GB News viewers and listeners, some of them will dismiss the whole idea of moving to net zero. Others will say, well, we do need to wean ourselves off oil and gas and fossil fuels over the medium term. But if we're going to do that, we've got to demonstrate to voters that renewables do lead to lower bills overall. And at the moment, they're not. And I can't see anything in these Labour plans, with the best will in the world. I'm very committed to looking in detail at the policy proposals of all the main parties. I can't see anything in these Labour plans which answers any of the questions that I've just posed. And I say that with regret, because we desperately need to have a proper discussion about our energy security.
We do, and it's so fascinating to look at all of these different ideas. Of course, it would be lovely to have lots more wind farms and even solar farms and nuclear power, which wouldn't arrive for another 10 years. But it needs to be married with some form of storage or capture for when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. I don't think we've heard anything about energy storage. We've heard about distribution, we've heard about generation, but not storage.
Indeed, energy storage is the great imponderable. Some people, some scientists put forward the use of hydrogen as a storage vehicle. Others say that we should be building much more underground gas storage. All we've got is the facility off the Yorkshire coast at Rough, a facility which has been largely diminished in recent years, though it has some extra capacity has reopened, but our gas storage is still very, very low by international standards. Look, I think the real focus for this isn't just going to be Labour and the Tories arguing over net zero. Another focus is going to be Scotland, which, of course, is so important to this election. Labour can't win big unless it wins big in Scotland, as it did back in 1997. And Scottish opinion is very, very split. Aberdeen is the oil and gas capital of Europe. You know, talk to trade unions across the country. Do they want to see an even bigger windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas? No, they don't. The GMB union does not, because it's got tens of thousands of workers with well-paid jobs in the oil and gas sector. And indeed, this is a big chunk of Scotland's economy. So this is largely a sort of very technical area, but, you know, high electricity and gas bills, hugely important in the minds of households and firms. And energy, I think, is a very, very difficult area for Labour, because it's got its kind of urban, pro-environment, left-wing voters who want more net zero initiatives. But then again, it's got a lot of natural voters in Scotland who look at what's happening in Aberdeen and suggest, gosh, the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas is already 75% of profits, and now Labour say they want a proper windfall tax.
I think it's 78%, I think they want. Thank you so much, Liam Halligan.